Show we're on recording. Good morning, Mark Scheibmeyer, the newly minted hearing examiner for the city of Issaquah. This being my first hearing for the city. So we'll be in a bit of a get acquainted mode this morning. Looking forward to working with all of you. The hearing today is a public hearing with respect to an application for preliminary plat approval for a project known as the Firs at Talus, bearing the case number PP 21-00001. It proposes the development of 19 single-family lots together with 5 tracts on 5.73 acres located at 7303 Renton Issaquah Road Southeast, or SR 900. The purpose of today's hearing is threefold: to receive additional information from city staff, supplementing or amplifying the staff report previously prepared by staff, followed then by an opportunity for the applicant to respond to that city presentation, followed then by an opportunity for public comment. And so, again, those who wish to be heard as members of the public will be first provided an opportunity to more fully receive the city's presentation, as well as the applicant's response, and hopefully that will provide some valuable information for the members of the public before they're asked to speak. I do not anticipate imposing a time limit on folks. I don't see a great many folks present today, and in light of that, I don't feel a need to impose a restraint. However, if anyone is exceeding 10 minutes, I'll be perhaps looking to see if they are remaining on point. If they are not, I may then rein them in. I don't anticipate that issue. Everyone who does testify today will do so under oath. Those are my few opening comments. The city may have a few additional ones, we'll see. So will it be Ms. Dollywall that will be presenting on behalf of the city, or another individual?
I'm Abby Weber. I'll be the primary presenter for the city, and supported by Minnie Dollywall, the director of the Community Planning and Development Department, as well as Emily Applegate, the manager of the Development Engineering Group.
Okay, so the staff report appears to have been authored by Ms. Dollywall, who's also present. Is it actually your report, Ms. Weber?
I drafted it on behalf of the city.
Okay, and your position would be?
I'm with BHC Consultants, senior planner, AICP certified. We've been working in a consulting capacity with the city of Issaquah for the last 4 or 5 months or so.
Okay, so a consulting planner for the city.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So we'll get underway with Ms. Weber's testimony. Ms. Weber, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
And I have a presentation that I'd like to share, so just please give me a moment to get my screens in order.
And by the way, while you're organizing that, if I can be provided a copy of the city's PowerPoint presentation later today as an additional exhibit for today's hearing, that would be great. The record should reflect that I am in receipt of not only the staff report, but all of the attachments to the report, which are 35 in number according to the staff report, all of which are admitted as exhibits.
Yes, and we will send you an updated presentation. There was an earlier version of the presentation that was submitted and listed on the staff report as an exhibit, but there were some minor typos that were corrected. So we'll make sure you get the updated version. And then there are 2 additional exhibits we wanted to submit today. That's a comment letter from the Washington State Department of Transportation, as well as, and that was received in response to the public hearing notice, and then also a copy of environmental neighborhood meeting checklist and notes.
Okay, so just so that we have our numbering consistent, I'll add the staff report itself as Exhibit 36.
Okay.
And the PowerPoint presentation as 37, with the WASDOT comment letter being 38, and the environmental meeting notes as 39. Okay, thank you.
Great. And are you able to see the slide that I'm sharing? I should say, or is it Talus?
I see that slide, yes.
Great. So as you mentioned before, the purpose of this public hearing is to facilitate the review and discussion of the proposed project by staff, the applicant, and the hearing examiner, and to hear public comment relevant to the proposal. So the subject of this hearing is on the preliminary plat, as well as 3 administrative adjustment of standards applications, and those project numbers are listed on the slide. So I'm going to give an overview of the review process. We'll review the site and the context, provide some project information and an overview of the development standards, and then also give staff recommendation. So this project is vested to the Issaquah Municipal Code subdivision ordinance and zoning and other land use controls that were in effect on March 8th, 2021. So that's when a complete preliminary plat application was submitted to the city. And so this project is vested to all of the substantive standards that were in place at that time, but not to procedures that were subsequently adopted by the city. So under the current code, preliminary plats are reviewed through a level 3 review process where the hearing examiner holds a public hearing and makes the final decision. And then the applicant's 3 I'm just going to refer to them as AAS applications. Those are subject to a level 2 administrative review process, but they were consolidated for review at the highest level. So they're all subject to the level 3 review process. And so the hearing examiner holds the public hearing and makes the final decision on both the preliminary plat and those 3 AAS applications. So prior to this point, the project went through 6 rounds of review with the city. City reviewers included land use, building, engineering, public works engineering, and then public works operations. The city also sent the project out for third-party peer reviewers, and that went to Cook Scientific, and they looked at wetlands and streams, and then Golder and Wood Enviro for geotechnical reviews. The comments and conditions of each of those reviewers have been incorporated into the staff report, and further review will also be required of the construction permits for the site work and the building permits. The city applied the adopted codes and standards, including the subdivision code, the land use code, environmental codes, street standards, and the stormwater manual. We also considered RCW 58.17.110, that's the Washington State subdivision law, as well as consistency with the comprehensive plan. And again, this proposal is subject to hearing examiner decision, so that will be made using the applicable approval criteria, and then it'll be made after the proposal was reviewed through the appropriate process, and it can be approved with conditions, or denied. So public notification for this proposal occurred in accordance with the code. A neighborhood meeting was held on February 11th, 2021. Notice of application occurred on April 15th, 2021, and had a subsequent 2-week public comment period. A community conference is required for preliminary plats in the Talus Urban Village, and that's regulated by Chapter 18.19C, the Talus replacement regulations, and we'll discuss those later. So that community conference was held on May 19th, 2021. And we've included, so comments were received and those were addressed in the community meeting and conference response memo, and that's included as an exhibit. And that community conference was held jointly with an environmental neighborhood meeting. And we have also included those meeting notes as an additional exhibit earlier at this hearing. So the city issued a mitigated determination of non-significance March 27th, 2024, and that had a 2-week comment period. No appeal was received, and comments that were received are addressed in the staff report. The notice of public hearing is occurring today. Notice of hearing was issued on June 10th, 2024. The city posted a sign on site, mailed out notice, emailed notice, and publication occurred in the official newspaper. And only one comment was received, and that was from the Washington State Department of Transportation, and that was included today as an additional exhibit. The site is located in the Talus urban village, and it is zoned urban village single family. The comprehensive plan land use designation is low density residential. Surrounding land uses include single family residences to the north, as well as undeveloped land, open space to the south. To the east, there are commercial uses, as well as additional single family residential uses, and to the west, single family residential and open space. The 5.73 acre site was previously developed with a single family home, which was demolished. There are some concrete structures and an existing asphalt driveway that remain. However, the site is otherwise vacant and largely forested. The existing concrete structures will be removed as part of the proposal. About 62% of the site is constrained by critical areas. There are 3 wetlands, a stream, steep slopes, and their buffers on site. There's a 4th wetland located just off-site to the south, which was considered in this review because of its proximity to access. And then the entire site is characterized as an erosion hazard area and is located within a critical aquifer recharge area. There are several existing easements on site. There are 2 existing tieback easements located along the east property line. Those are for tiebacks associated with a large retaining wall that's just outside the east property line along State Route 900. And there is also an existing access easement to the south of the site that provided access over the adjacent city-owned property. That easement has since been terminated, and access is realigned with a new easement as part of this proposal. So the proposal is to subdivide the property into 19 lots and 5 tracts. The lots are to be developed with 19 attached single-family townhouse units, and those will be in 3 separate buildings. And those are labeled lots 1 through 19. And then the 5 tracts are labeled A through E, and those are for access and utilities, open space, critical areas, and stormwater facilities. So each residential unit will be located on a separate lot for the purpose of fee simple ownership, and tracts A through E will be in joint ownership. The proposal includes a private internal road labeled Road A. And there'll be a sidewalk and planting strip located along the north and eastern edge of the access tract. And that will provide access to Issaquah Road, which is also known as State Route 900. And again, as I mentioned before, the proposal will realign the existing access easement over the adjacent property to the south. And the purpose of that was to minimize impacts on the wetland buffer. And the project includes water and sewer utility connections, as well as stormwater facilities. It also includes a trail connection to an existing trail within the Talus neighborhood to the west of the site. That'll occur along the north property line. And there'll be a 100-foot vegetative buffer that's required by code, and that'll be provided along the east property line. And you can see on this slide those tieback easements that I referred to before, which are along that east property line on site. There are the 3 wetlands on site. So those are shown in green on the site plan. The 3 on-site wetlands are all classified as category 3 wetlands. The off-site wetland, the 4th wetland, is a category 2 wetland that you can see in the lower right corner of the screen. There'll be temporary impacts to that 4th wetland off-site as a result of reestablishing the existing impervious surface area as buffer, as well as restoring area that was disturbed by construction. But the mitigation of the temporary buffer impacts will result in a net gain of buffer area ultimately. The stream on site is a class 3 stream, which starts in the vicinity of wetland E and then flows off site at a midpoint on the south property line. And there are 2 steep slope areas shown in purple on the site plan. Those are in the northeast and southwest corners of the site. The buffer area of the northeast slope is proposed to be reduced to 10 feet, which is allowed by code, is supported by geotechnical analysis. So on preliminary review, the reduction was acceptable, but the technical review and approval will occur during the building permit applications. And regardless of the reduction, buildings are required to be set back 25 feet from the edge of that steep slope. And so the entire site is characterized as an erosion hazard area, and again, it's located in the class 3 critical aquifer recharge area. So the proposal includes 3 requested administrative adjustment of standards. Those application numbers are listed here. The first one is for tree retention. And so the request is to reduce the required minimum tree caliper that is to be retained. The next one is for sidewalk improvements. So it's a request to adjust the street standards to reduce the requirement for sidewalk and planter strips from.
I'm sorry, I try not to interrupt very often, but before we pass by that second one, your staff report references it's only an application to remove the sidewalk and planter strip on one side of the road. The application itself seeks to narrow the remaining planting strip from 5 feet to 4.5 feet, but I don't see that mentioned again in the staff report itself. Do you know if that request was still continues?
My understanding is that it's shown as 5. The planter strip is shown as 5 feet on the plans. I'd need the applicant to confirm that.
Yeah, the original.
So I think it was an earlier version of the application that was.
That's a year ago application, and I wonder if it hadn't been adjusted since then. We can come back to that with the applicant. I didn't know if the city had a better, more information. Okay. Sorry, Dan.
Oh, that's right. So the second one is for sidewalk, or sorry, that's what we were just talking about. The third one is for road grade, and so that is to adjust the street standards to increase the maximum slope of the private access road from 12% to 14.8%. And so I've pointed to the code sections that contain the approval criteria on this slide. The applicant has provided a project narrative in response to these criteria as exhibits, and these are analyzed in the staff report as well. So again, the project is vested to the land use code in effect on March 8th, 2021. So a copy of this code was provided as an exhibit for easy reference. Well, that's a really long document. So this site is located in the Talus urban village. And so it's therefore subject to chapter 18.19C, the Talus replacement regulations. And so those regulations replaced the Talus development agreement when that expired, which is the main item I wanted to point out on this slide. So many of the standards are discussed throughout the staff report, but building design and layouts in the individual lot calculations were not shown on the plat, and that'll be a part of the, so those standards will be reviewed during the later construction, landscape, and site work permit applications. So staff recommends approval of the FERS at Talus preliminary plat and administrative adjustment of standards, subject to the 23 conditions that were outlined in the staff report. And again, we've provided the staff report plus 34 exhibits, and then the additional exhibits that were provided at this hearing. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. I have a few questions, not too many. The site map shows a turnaround at the north central location of the site for emergency vehicle purposes, I think primarily. So just east of the last three lots to the northwest. Is that intended for connectivity to any future development of property to the north? Or asked slightly differently, what are the city standards for connectivity of adjoining subdivisions?
I would need to defer that question to either Ms. Dollywall or Ms. Applegate, but it is my understanding that it is not the intent to provide connectivity to the adjacent site to the north.
Okay, I may ask. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just not able to speak to the city's requirements for connectivity.
Okay, I may come back with other staff to just provide a bit more information for me. The next question is a first cousin to that one. Do you know what the city, what the maximum allowed number of single family units is before 2 access points are required?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that requirement.
Okay, again, I may check with other staff.
Mm-hmm.
Does the plan propose parking along the private roadway? I can't tell well enough from the maps as to whether it's included or not. Do you have a sense?
Well, each unit is intending to provide 2 parking spaces.
Right. I'm sorry. I'm on-street parking. I didn't know very well.
And then tract B will include 7 parking spaces that will be available.
Right. So in lieu of on-street parking, each lot has its own 2 plus tract B parking, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I am a bit tangled in the tree retention caliper percentage analysis. Perhaps, well, there's so much information that perhaps I'm drowning in it, and partly because of some of the information being acknowledged to have been inaccurate. The result is I can't quite tell where all that ends. In other words, as a result of any adjustments in numbers, what exactly is the requested adjustment being sought from minimum caliper requirement?
Absolutely. And I just need to refer to the staff report to make sure I get it right myself. So 25% is the requirement.
I'm sorry. And what do you regard the application seeking in the way of an adjustment?
Yeah, I'm just double checking the staff report. Yeah, I'm sorry. I see where we say it's the 23.6% is incorrect.
Right. I wasn't, couldn't tell if a restated number could be found
Yeah.
anywhere in the materials.
If it's all right, I could take a little time on the side and return to this issue.
I think that's a great approach. It's that gotcha kind of question that's really hard to answer on quick notice, and so we may give a few minutes for that once we're through with our and after I've gone to other staff for a few questions. Your PowerPoint presentation does not include a map with topographical information. Do you have one that's readily available?
Let me just stop sharing. I can pull up the plans, the exhibits. So I'm sharing exhibit 5.
Oh, great. Thank you. Can you enlarge slightly? The area I'm seeking is the northwest portion. There we go. Great. What I'm looking at, Ms. Weber, is the proposed trail that leads across the northwest corner and then continues into the Talus development. And I'm just looking at that relative to the topo lines and trying to confirm that that's not an overly steep trail. Do you have a sense of the pitch of that trail? Is there anything about it that would be unusually difficult to traverse by a pedestrian?
I am not familiar with what the slope of it would be, but the final alignment of the trail will be reviewed at a later point prior to final plat.
Perhaps to address any pitch or grade type issues as well as buffer issues. For example, your report notes that the proposed location will have some piece of it within the buffer for wetland B, and some accommodation will need to be made for that. I assume that and grade issues will be addressed in the final site review then?
Yes, but I'm not aware of any criteria that the city would apply when considering slope of the trail.
Sure, I know there may not be criteria, but I didn't know from a practical standpoint whether there were any seeming concerns as to its pitch. I know it's out of any steep slope area, those be to the southwest of the trail location, but I couldn't tell if it was still, even though not deemed a steep slope, was still such a slope as to be problematic for pedestrians. But you don't have anything suggesting that in your information?
I do not, no.
Oh, all right. Well, one of the reasons I was curious about that is what students will do to reach a school bus. That is, whether they're expected to work down toward the highway to a bus stop, or they are expected to take the trail up into Talus to catch a bus. Do you know what was expected?
So sorry, I'm getting some background noise. So the school bus stop will actually be on State Route 900. So any school-age students living on site will be taking the sidewalk along Road A down to State Route 900 to be
Okay.
the bus stop. Okay. And so there's currently no, for any children walking from the Talus neighborhood, there's currently no pedestrian access through the site that provides access to State Route 900 for bus pickup.
Okay. And if I think it was in the TIA or may have been in some other materials, whether students are coming to or from any of the schools, they can be dropped off or picked up on the west side of the highway, such that they're not being asked to cross this busy highway. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Okay.
And we confirmed that with the school district.
Okay, thanks. I don't think it was talked about in the stormwater report. It may have been, and I again, not qualified enough to follow well. I'm always concerned with maintaining the hydrology of wetlands as part of stormwater systems. So in other words, what we don't want are stormwater systems so good that they deny wetlands needed hydrology. Do you have any sense as to whether the hydrology of these effectively 4 wetlands were taken into consideration as far as the release of water from either the detention vaults or tanks or the system itself?
Well, for stormwater facility questions, I need to defer those to Miss Emily Applegate from the city. Otherwise, I believe the applicant also has their wetland specialists attending today.
Okay. I think I'll do it that way. So just one last thing. It's a term I haven't had used in my other jurisdictions. And I think because there are not quite so in such intense urban areas. But there is reference on page 13 of your report to the city's trip bank. And I just haven't run into that concept. And I'm just curious if you could explain a little bit better how trip calculations work and how the trip bank is applied to them.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to defer that also to Ms. Applegate.
Okay.
That question.
That's probably the most efficient approach. So let's work back in reverse on some of those questions. So first of all, Ms. Weber, did any of my questions pose any additional comments from your end? Anything else that you wanted to add?
No, but I can look into the tree retention calculation.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask other staff a couple of questions, and if at the end of that, if we have any update, that'll be great. I'll first turn to Ms. Applegate.
I'm assuming that's me, Emily Appleton,
Oh,
engineering manager.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. And Ms. Appleton, your position with the city is what?
I manage the engineering group and community planning and development.
Okay, thank you. So there were a couple of questions I posed to Ms. Weber that she thought you might be a better source for response. Let's begin with wetland hydrology. And so what we have a highly unusual site here that is the majority of which is critical area, including 3 category 3 wetlands and a nearby offsite one, all of which having some impact upon stormwater systems. And so as to this project, how is it, if you can better educate me on how stormwater is intended to assure the hydrology of those wetlands?
Well, the stormwater system that's installed, maintains the flow of the the site, the entrance point and the exit point. But the systems installed will deal with the stormwater on the improvements, the roadway and the sites. There's no specific stormwater improvements specifically related to wetland hydrology, and maybe the applicant's stormwater engineer might be a little bit more equipped to answer that. But that's considered when it's evaluated under the stormwater manual requirements.
Okay, so obviously any stormwater system will abide by the applicable version of the stormwater manual. I didn't know if this one in particular, in some of my communities, there is a significant focus on designing the systems to make certain that hydrology is met, and that varies a little bit from city to city as to how that's approached. I didn't know if Issaquah has anything specific that it imposes over and above what the manual may impose. Anything that you would know that the city would add to the manual?
Nothing that I'm aware of related to that. Yes.
Okay. I asked about the city's trip bank program, as I'm unfamiliar with that. Can you just give me a better sense of how that works?
Certainly. The city maintains a traffic model for the whole city, and they've done work in the past, most recently in 2020, I think they updated it, and they consider all of the developable land and all the proposed improvements from the trip, and they look at how many trips are available across the whole city. They divide it into subzones, but it's generally the trip bank covers the entire city. And there's a certain number of trips that are available. And then as we issue development permits, by issuing concurrency, we make a reservation in the trip bank, and that balance is then adjusted. And then every so often, every several years, 3 to 5 years, the city updates the traffic model and considers what's been issued and redoes the whole thing and updates the trip bank balance.
Okay, so if I can paraphrase in this instance, your traffic impact analysis has sort of a twofold approach. One is simply to ensure that the project itself has no noticeable traffic impacts beyond those which can be mitigated through traffic impact fees. And then secondly, that the project does have available reserve slots within the trip bank so that when it goes forward, that those slots are available. Is that?
That is accurate, yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Getting back to the question I posed about the proposed trail leading up to Talus, anything that you might add to Ms. Weber's comments about grade and making certain that it's a traversable trail by pedestrians? Anything that you note from this project that is noteworthy?
I have nothing to add to her response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all the questions I have of you, Ms. Appleton. My last staff that I'll ask questions of is Ms. Dollywall. So if I can have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And you may need to remind me of the, I was seeking information about the city's general philosophy or policies toward connectivity and like issues, as well as minimum required accesses for subdivisions. So as to connectivity, what generally is the city's policies as announced in their comprehensive plan or elsewhere as to the desirability of connecting each subdivision to the next?
Yeah, so the city has mobility master plan that kind of establishes the city's goals for multimodal connections and so on and so forth. The reality of some of these connections for very steep slopes and such over here are complex. Obviously, I think the review of this particular project did not include any connectivity requirements to the property to the north, to the best of my knowledge. And that turnaround was just the fire truck turnaround requirement.
Oh, would it be fair to say that that was topographically driven that again, moving north, you're just moving into a steep slope such that trying to connect to that neighborhood, should it develop, would be problematic, or was it other reasons?
I wasn't involved in the early stages of this project, so I'm not sure if that came through the property owner to the north comment as well. It's possible sometimes, the neighboring property owners are reluctant to have that sort of, or was it a topographical issue? I assume it was probably both. Um,
Back to my question about general policy. Cities are somewhat over the map on how they view this issue. Olympia, very strong statement of desired connectivity, where every subdivision is hoped to be well connected to all surrounding ones. Others don't have a declared policy. They simply have a practical application where they recognize it as being a good idea, but not necessarily one that's mandated. Where would you put Issaquah among cities as to this issue?
I would say traffic is an issue for this community, and so more access points is always a desired, feature. The reality for Issaquah is some of these sites are very difficult for access and steep slopes and critical areas, so it's a balancing act of all of those items to kind of get a more realistic take on what can actually be achievable on the ground. But in terms of our code requirement, we may have policy objectives, but in terms of our code requirement that are translated into regulations, I think this particular project did not have any sort of requirement for that.
Okay. And then back to my related question as to required access points. A number of cities that I'm involved with mandate a second access point at a certain number of single family units, say typically 25. Does Issaquah have a maximum number of allowed single family units before a second access point is required?
Uh, we have frontage improvements and things like that, but uh, the whole Talus development has one access point, and we hear from the community a lot in terms of that master plan community has only one way out. There's an emergency access from James Bush Road, which is pretty steep outside of this property particularly. So this particular site, there's a little bit of history, I think was part of the whole master plan community called the Talus development. That's why you see the zoning, which is 24 lots were allotted for it. It didn't get developed during that time frame. That development agreement sunset, and then we had replacement regulations in place, which is what this project is vested to. So I think the focus here in terms of reviewing this one left lot for Talus, there wasn't any discussion about two access points for this for the 19 units, is my understanding. Yeah.
Just an aside, it's always fascinating to move into another community for doing this work. It's evidence of how each one has charted its own philosophies, its own critical needs or highest priorities. And so you'll have to forgive me in advance if from time to time I drag concepts important to other communities in just to see how they fit or don't fit. But I recognize that for Issaquah, some of these things aren't at the same level of priority as they may be in some other
Yeah,
states.
and we will continue to have those discussions because our emergency planning is taking a big role in all of this as well. So evacuation routes and such become more important as we talk about wildfires, we talk about other things, and so but in terms of specific code requirements at this time for which this particular project was reviewed under, we did not have a requirement for two access points.
Great. Okay, thank you. Those are the questions I have of you. We'll come back to Ms. Weber if she has any update on this tree retention issue. Did you find anything in your review?
I'm looking on.
You're not audible. audible at that. You began so, and then you cannot be heard at this point. Ever so often you can very faintly be heard, but only occasionally and only very lightly.
You can change it.
There, that helps. It's still poor though. No, unfortunately, we've suddenly pretty much lost your audio.
If I turn on my camera, are you able to hear me?
Can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm going to change any settings. Okay, so I pulled up exhibit number 10, which is the updated tree report, and I don't see the that
Okay.
number that we're referring to in there, but calculated it comes to 18.9%.
Okay, Ms. Weber, unfortunately, there was just a whisper of audio there, but it was never good enough to actually understand. What I may do is come back via the applicant first, confirm what it is they're seeking, and that might provide us some guidance, and then we'll have to decide if we need to receive additional information from staff regarding that. So we'll sort of work at the back door and see if that works. So I'll regard the city's application as being complete. I'm sorry, city's presentation as being complete. And we'll turn then to the applicant for testimony and any other response. So that would be initially, at least, through the owner, Mr. Suber, who is present. So, Mr. Suber, let's have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Hey.
You've heard the presentation by the various city representatives. Taking that into consideration, as well as some of the questions I've been posing, and as well as issues you think are most important, tell me what you think I should know about this application.
Certainly, thank you. Just some general information that you've already touched on, but I'll go and just give a brief synopsis. Our gross site area of this project is 5.37 acres. Our developable area of the site is 2.19 acres. Our actual developed site area is 1.15 acres, which is approximately 21% of the site. As mentioned previously, parking, which can sometimes be an issue in tight communities like this. We are providing 2 parking spaces for each single family home. In addition, we are providing 7 guest parking spaces. There is no on-site parking available on the road. We have asked for several administrative adjustment of standards, one being the roadway, and I'd like to share my screen. To bring up site. The first AAS that we requested relates to tree preservation, and you've touched on this previously. And there were several errors in our paperwork, but I wanted to clarify. 25% is the required retention for this site. We are requesting a reduction to a net of 16% retention on the site. What I'm showing here is an aerial view of our project with the surrounding site, showing a heavily wooded site. The area of our development and our lots also contains a very high concentration of trees. And unfortunately, it makes it very difficult for us to come up with a land plan that utilizes, that minimizes the removal of trees. In this case, we feel that a reduction to 16% will allow us to get a total of 19 units on the site, which is economically feasible. I also wanted to point out there is one single family home located just north. It'd be to the northwest of our proposed lot 8. The boundary of that property is right here. And the home is located, this is the only home in the general vicinity of our site. In our community meeting, there were questions from residents of Talus asking what the proximity of our site was to the homes up in Talus above us. And it's approximately 325 feet from the rear property line of the closest home in Talus to the property line of our closest home proposed in the Firs at Talus, and approximately 125 feet of vertical separation as well. That area is heavily wooded and will retain a heavy natural wooded field due to the wetlands and steep slopes that are on the site. The second AAS that we've requested is for an adjustment of the road grade. In general, we are able to maintain a 12% road grade through the majority of the lower portion of the site. But as we begin to enter approximately lot 19, we're requesting a deviation that would allow us a steeper road grade to 14.8%. This is consistent with many of the roads in the Talus neighborhood as well, due to the mountain topography and the nature of the site. We feel that that is critical for us. It also allows for us to minimize the amount of grading activity that will be required on site and exporting of excess dirt that will have to come off the site. There is at the fire truck turnaround that you had mentioned previously, there was a question about connectivity to the north. We have been in discussion with the property owner directly north, Mr. Joseph Amundsen. We have indicated, and he has requested, that we provide a future access easement for the possibility of constructing of a residence in the future with a utility easement as well. We will propose that in our future construction documents, as well as our final plat, that we would provide that any further studies or engineering or other things required by Mr. Amundsen would be a separate application with the city, and he'd have to go through a separate review for that. Let's see. School bus pickup, we had been confirmed by the Issaquah School District that students will be picked up and dropped off right at the entrance on SR 900 at the bottom of our site. The trail slope question that you had, Mr. Examiner, we are proposing a relocatable trail easement. Final alignment would be determined with staff. I have a similar project I'm working on in Issaquah, and we had similar topography and other issues on that site. It's actually directly across the road from this project. And we conducted an on-site tour with park staff and actually came up with the final trail alignment that we will survey in as an as-built. And so it is a steep grade to walk up that. And there's no easy way to get from below to above other than walking up a steep trail. But the final alignment will be guided by staff as well. I've requested I have both my wetland consultant as well as my civil engineer that can discuss the wetlands and hydrology. I do want to point out that wetland B and the stream are both located above the proposed development. They're separated by a 50 to 75 foot buffer. The lots will be below that. Wetland A is below these, the proposed development, and wetland D is located at the bottom of the site, off-site, is an existing wetland to the south of our project, and that is also below. I do have one other slide I'd like to share, and that is we prepared a slide for tree retention that would show, this shows the existing trees that we have proposed, they're proposed for removal. They have a red circle with a black X inside. And in this example, this shows what a required 25% tree retention over this site would do as far as our usable lots. In this case, we would lose a total of 9 lots by retaining 25% tree retention on this site. And those are represented by an X in those lots. And I've provided both of these slides to staff that they can also forward on to you, Mr. Examiner. The tree retention is very critical to our application. The road grade is critical to our application also because it reduces the amount of grading on site. The city has a requirement that no retaining wall can exceed 10 feet. And this proposal does not have any retaining walls exceeding 10 feet in vertical height. Were we to regrade the site, it would require extensive retaining walls in order to achieve a grade of 12% on our roads. Lastly, the administrative adjustment requesting a reduction in the roadway width so that there is a sidewalk on one side. We're proposing a 5-foot sidewalk, a 5-foot planter, and then a paved road standard on one side. And that is primarily driven by the presence of 2 critical areas. One would be wetland A, and the other would be tract D steep slope area. You can see by the setbacks on both that it creates a pinch point for access into the site. That is the reason for our request at the guidance of staff. We do not propose to alter any of our wetland buffers. With this application, there won't be any buffer averaging or impact to buffers. We're staying outside of that to minimize any potential environmental issues. If it's all right, I'd like to see if Sherry Murata from Core Design, our civil engineer, could address hydrology unless you have any other questions.
1 or 2 before we do that. So just to confirm, although your original application for the administrative adjustment for sidewalks spoke of not only eliminating the sidewalk and planter strip on one side, but also spoke to reducing the remaining planter strip to 4.5 feet. That portion of your request you're no longer pursuing, correct?
Mr. Examiner, if I could, I'll ask Sherry to confirm that when she testifies for you as well. I don't remember the 4.5. In my mind, I always had it was 5 feet. So I'll have to just confirm that. It's
sure. That's fine. So let's turn to Ms. Murata. Ms. Murata, let's have you first sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
In your position?
I'm a civil engineer with Core Design.
Okay. And so you've heard the things that the applicant has deferred to you for. Let's begin with those and see if that generates any additional questions. So as to those things, what would you like to add?
So regarding the analysis for the wetland, The preliminary TIR in section 4.4 goes through the criteria for analyzing the wetland protection guidelines from DOE. Based on that, only wetland A meets the criteria for analyzing the wetland hydro period. So what we did is we looked at the amount of flow going to the wetland in the pre-developed condition, which is like existing conditions today, and what the flow would be like under developed conditions, and then we compare what the change is. So there's a table that looks at every month, and it summarizes the change in volume. So it ranges from about 3% to about 33% or 34% change. The lowest month was July, which is 3%, and these flow rates are really tiny. So a 3% change, that's like the pre-developed flow rate was 0.0013, and then the developed flow rate is 0.0012. So it's very small. That's a very small change. And these changes in volumes, I believe, was looked at by our critical area consultant, who is also online as part of this hearing. Regarding the planter width.
Ms. Morano,
Yes.
let me just stop you there. To summarize, if we were to summarize, then the proposed stormwater system is not regarded as likely to either starve wetland A of water or drown it in water, and neither outcome is foreseen based upon the stormwater design, correct?
Correct. So the change is not more than 34% or so between the developed and pre-developed condition.
And is that an increase or decrease of 34%?
It is a decrease because the area that was flowing to the wetland, we have to detain for and meet our flow control requirements. So there is a little bit less water going to the wetlands in the developed condition than the pre-developed condition, due to having our project having to meet stormwater regulations.
And the time of greatest decrease would be winter months then?
The winter months, so like February and March were the highest. I would say December through March were the highest months, with like 33 and 34% decrease of flow to the wetland.
Okay. Does that have to undergo any agency review, either ecology or any other agency relating to wetland management? Do any of them have to sign off on that?
I believe for this one, it was just the city of Issaquah was reviewing this.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of any. I was just curious if there was something I didn't know of. Okay, thank you. And so turning to the other issue as to road or sidewalk, I'm sorry, planter strip.
The planter?
Yes.
Yeah, so the planter, at one point it was 4.5 feet, but it is now, we have revised that to provide the 5 feet width. It was 5 feet of planter, not including the curb.
Okay, good. All right. Anything else that you heard in the way of either city presentations or the applicant's presentation that you might have had any additional comment about?
You did have a question regarding the slope of that trail, kind of through once you get past our property. I was looking at the average slope was around like 23% through a majority of that area. So it's steep, but it's definitely, I would think, navigatable, and it will be relocated in the field based on trying to avoid trees and trying to put that trail through like the flattest area possible, given the conditions.
Okay. You may not be the party to ask this question. The fact of a trail, is it generally desired, or was there something about a strong desire to have this development connected to what's above that is driving the trail? Are you in a position to respond to that poorly worded question?
I believe the trail was a requirement that we had to provide a trail connection. It was a requirement from the city that we had to connect our project to Talus.
Okay. I just, sometimes we can try so hard that we end up with something that, while well-meaning, is not necessarily functional or beneficial, or in fact counterproductive of potentially being so steep as to be a risk. And so I didn't know if you, from your civil engineering perspective, you saw anything about that trail that, while a noble goal for the community, is perhaps worrisome from a health and safety standpoint.
I think the final alignment would have a better idea when during construction what that final alignment will be. It'll definitely be at least probably a 23%. This is in no way meant to be an ADA path or anything like that. But given the grade out there, that is probably, it would be at least that steep through between our site and Talus.
Okay, all right. Well, that's helpful. I appreciate all of that. Anything else that you would like to add?
No, unless you have any additional questions for me.
I do not. Mr. Suber, anything else that you would like to present in the way of the applicant's presentation?
I also have David Teasdale, who is a wetland consultant with ACE Engineers, that could also talk to Ms. Murata's testimony about the impacts to wetland A.
Okay, so Mr. Teasdale, let's have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And your position?
I'm a senior ecologist with PACE Engineers, formerly Talus.
And in this particular project, are you brought in by the applicant or by the city?
The applicant.
Okay. So you've heard my questioning about maintaining hydrology of wetlands, and recognizing that, as Mr. Suber noted correctly, that wetlands B and C are are of a higher elevation than the proposed development, and therefore unaffected by its drainage, but that wetland A lies below the development and will be impacted to some extent by it and its stormwater management. So with that in mind, tell me what you would think is important to add to what has already been presented.
Other than wetland A will be at a lower elevation than the proposed project, so it will be receiving groundwater from that lower elevation. However, discharging stormwater north of the wetland in the buffer will help to maintain that hydrology.
So the previous witness had spoken to there being, for the modeling, Ms. Murata had explained that modeling suggests that this system may result in a decrease in distribution of water to the wetland during certain months of up to 34%. Is there anything about that you find worrisome, problematic, or inconsistent with any requirements that you have to achieve?
If memory serves, that those reductions were happening mostly in the summer months. And
well, actually, they're happening February and March.
February and March. Okay. Sorry, I haven't frozen. February, March, that it's towards the end of the rainy season.
Yeah, her testimony was that that would be the area of the greatest impact. The least impact would be during the summer months, when it's down to only a 3% distinction.
Right, and that that 3% is based on a comparison to a very low flow rate into the wetlands
Right.
during those summer months.
Right. So 3% of very little is very little.
Right. Yeah, basically,
So
right.
I'm just trying to make certain, since I'm not well versed on such matters, that I am not doing something that would be regarded as unusually harmful to this wetland, and that the proposed actions are consistent with the city's critical areas regulations and comprehensive plan vision for critical areas. So anything about this project that you feel is problematic relative to either the city's regulations or its vision?
I do not. Typically, the rainiest part of the seasons is, November through December, and sometimes into January. So the wetland will be receiving a considerable amount of hydrology at that time. And it sounds, if I remember, if I heard correctly, sorry, if I hadn't, March falls in the normal.
What was it? What did you say about March? March was at 34%. I do have a correction. I was looking at the table, and actually August was kind of the only month that was like the worst month. It is actually at 77%, but that's because the initial flow is so low in the pre-developed. It's at 0.001. So
Right.
it doesn't take much change for it to have a huge impact on the, even a tiny change results in a big percentage of the pre-developed. So in August, it was 0.001. For pre-developed, the developed is 0.0018. So it's actually a slight increase in August, but it is 77% because that initial flow is so low in the pre-developed condition.
Right. So yeah, I don't have any strong feelings about that.
Okay. All right.
There's a large percent difference, but in terms of the total amount of water, it's negligible. It's probably not even measurable.
Okay, that's helpful. I once again, I'm repeating myself, but each community has a somewhat different viewpoint on the steps necessary to preserve its wetlands. All recognize the importance of wetlands and the critical need to both protect the wetlands themselves and their buffers. But storm drainage becomes this odd appendix to all of that, where the delivery of too little or too much water to a wetland can be more impactful than development nearby. And hence my line of questioning is just making sure that while these have been well buffered, need to also make sure that they're actually well functioning, which are two different things. So your information has been helpful in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
That, I believe, concludes the applicant's presentation. And so we'll turn to hear if through city staff, whether there are members of the public present wishing to be heard today. So Candace, are you showing individuals wishing to be heard?
I am not.
Okay. Do you show any members of the public present?
Not physically. I can't quite tell with the.
I think everyone is with me that is.
Okay. All right. So the record will reflect that there was an invitation for public comment, that there is no one from the public wishing to be heard. So we'll go back to city staff for final response to the applicant's presentation. So Ms. Weber, we'll first test and see if you have audio at this point. Can we hear from you?
Are you able to hear me better now?
Much better. It's fine now. Thank you.
And nothing has changed. So
okay. The one thing that was resolved through the applicant's testimony was the scope of the tree retention variance. And so it is a sought reduction from 25% to 16%. With that in mind, does the city have any additional response or any opposition to that request?
No, that was the same calculation I came up with based on the numbers that were provided for the percentage of retention, and both required and proposed in the updated tree inventory report. Just the percentage itself wasn't given, so sorry about that.
Okay, and then as to all the other matters that the applicant and his representative spoke to, are there any things that the city would like to reply to?
Well, I guess I would like additional clarification on the trail, because the review of the trail was before my involvement in the project, so it's not clear to me. It's not, so the Talus replacement regulations identifies several sites where trails are required. And it's my understanding that this trail isn't identified as a required trail. So I'd like the applicant to clarify whether it was, or perhaps Ms. Dollywall could weigh in first, whether this was required or voluntarily provided by the applicant.
Let's begin with city. Ms. Dollywall, could you provide us some historical background to this question?
Sure. So for the record, Minnie Dollywall, it seems like there are two categories of trails in Talus. I was just looking up the code exhibit that's been attached. There's a neighborhood trail and there's a forest path. The character of this neighborhood hearing examiner is there's a lot of trail connections. It's right by the Cougar Mountain. So trail connectivity was important as part of the master planning process here. And so there are different standards for whether it's a neighborhood trail versus a forest path. And there are standards. So we will ensure that as the site development permit comes in, we'll ensure that it complies with those standards of the Talus replacement regulations. We also have Holly Keaton, who was the original planner on this project. She was out on leave, but she has joined this hearing today and is in attendance. I don't know, Holly, do you want to add anything in terms of the code requirement for this trail during the early phases of the review?
If Ms. Keaton's going to respond, we'll need to have her sworn. So Ms. Keaton, first of all, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You've heard Ms. Dollywall's comments. You've heard my earlier questioning of the applicant. What might you add to that discussion?
So just to kind of reiterate what Ms. Dollywall just stated, I've been out on leave. Today is my first day back. I was deeply involved as the key planner on this project up until the end of March. So I'm going to refer off of my what I have left in memory of the project in my mind at the time. This site did not require a trail connection. However, in the Talus replacement regulations, it was noted several times the importance of trail connectivity throughout Talus. And in working with the applicant agreed to provide that connectivity as the city stance was that was of primary importance for any development within the Talus urban village. Due to the critical areas, the complexity of the site, I believe we said that the forest trail was the most appropriate type because of the issues of the site. And I would defer to the applicant to verify my memory of those details.
That is what your staff report says. It acknowledges that the forest path is the preferable approach toward this trail. My only question being, are we trying too hard to do something good that we're potentially causing some kind of a risk? Is there anything that about this location that is so steep or so problematic that we're creating an attractive nuisance of some kind that is better left not required? I'm not sensing that in anyone's testimony, but I'm wanting to make sure that I'm not imposing something that then is found to have been troublesome, perhaps even requiring an amendment later on to undo something that was realized later to have been not as well thought out as hoped. Anything that you would add?
I remember there being quite a lot of conversation about the location of the trail and how it had to be placed in order to mitigate any concerns that you sound to be presenting. So in addition, there have been critical area reviewers on both sides of the project for the applicant as well as for the city. And all aspects of the project that have been in critical areas, have been proposed in critical areas or adjacent to critical areas have been reviewed. So I think at this stage in the game, that is not a concern.
Okay, all right, that's what I'm seeking, is that kind of definitive answer, and I do appreciate that. I'll come back to Ms. Weber. Any last closing comments from the city?
I think the issue that you brought up, hearing examiner, about the connectivity to the property to the north and the applicant's testimony related to that there are conversations with the property owner to set up an easement. I think it would be nice to put a closure on that in terms of whether that is part of the proposal to get an easement. Of course, the design of the rest of the stuff, I think I understood the applicant saying that will come later in terms of the future connection. But the easement on the road to provide future access, it wasn't clear to me from the applicant's testimony if that is part of their proposal or not.
The point's well made. And actually, I think it's from both sides. I was a bit curious as to what the city's position would be, as well as what the applicant is proposing in that regard. And
Yeah.
It's a chicken and egg situation. I'm not sure where to begin with that. Since I have the city presently testifying, Ms. Dollywall, from the city's perspective, is it considering asking for an additional condition of project approval to address that? Or is it simply seeking more information? Where does the city law stand currently?
Yeah. I think I will pull in my staff to help me with this one as well. But my understanding is that if the street standards this is not a public street and it's a private street. So if it serves more than 4 lots, it would have been a public street, and then the connectivity is not an issue because it's a public street. Anyone can connect to a public street. But because there was a deviation granted for it to be a private street, I'm wondering if that has been vetted out by our public works through this approval process of what that entails. And maybe the applicant can help us connect the dots there. But Emily, Appleton, or Holly, if you guys have any memory of what was decided and discussed and debated during the different stages.
I'll speak quickly to that and let Emily finish if that's all right. I just wanted to point out that through my review of this project and in coordination with the engineering reviewers, there is a requirement for the applicant to provide a traffic study, which speaks to the requirements for connectivity and access. And so as a supplement to code standards, that would have been provided and reviewed. And in addition to that, no connectivity to the northern parcel was required under my land use review. I did know that there was communication between the applicant and the property owner to the north. My understanding was that communication was due to the property owner to the north wishing to also do a plat at some point in time, or a short plat. So if my memory serves me, the connection was not required. The applicant for this project has made an agreement with the applicant or with the property owner to the north and has agreed to create that easement.
Okay. Well, first of all, Ms. Appleton, anything that you wish to add to Ms. Keaton's comments?
I have nothing significant to add. I was just going to note that there was not a requirement to connect the plat and the standards when we reviewed it, and it did not come up when we conferred with our Public Works Department.
Okay, I'm trying to distinguish a promise of some kind as opposed to an obligation, those being significantly different things. And so let's turn back to the applicant, Mr. Suber. You've heard the city's position. Not to make you repeat all that you said before, but in light of their comments, how might you sum up the applicant's position regarding this issue?
Yeah, I would sum it up as a promise to the property owner to the north that we would provide a future access easement through that hammerhead that abuts his property. Any future land use, he understands, would be a separate application with the city. We would record a perpetual access easement over our private road, which will be owned and maintained by our homeowners association to allow for a future connection if one is so granted through the approval process by the city.
So as the hearing examiner, I not only again decide whether to approve or an application or not, but to determine whether any additional conditions should be imposed over and above those that have been recommended by city staff. And everybody's dancing around this question just a little bit as to whether or not anyone is seeking an additional condition project approval. Let me rephrase my question. If I was thinking about adding a condition that obligated connectivity to the property by easement, access easement via this turnaround, how would that be reacted to by the applicant? And that's a question posed to Mr. Suber.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question there. Maybe.
It was a roundabout worded question. If I was thinking about adding a condition of project approval that required you to provide an access easement to the property owner to the north at the site of the turnaround, would you object to that additional condition?
I do not object to that.
Okay. In that case, I do appreciate that and the clarification and the cooperation of all on that issue. I'm going to go ahead and approve the preliminary plat application subject to the conditions recommended by city staff with one additional condition that does impose the access easement to the property to the north at the site of the turnaround so that we do have available connectivity, which is always an excellent thing. And again, as Ms. Dollywall has noted, that would otherwise not be guaranteed because this is not a public street. So apart from that last issue, I'm comfortable with everything that's been sought, including the three administrative application adjustments. I find all three to be well presented and note that again, the city has provided its full support of all three. And finally, that there is no public opposition either to those amendments or adjustments or to the application itself, at least as of today. While there was a few early public comments received at the SEPA phase, those comments are nothing that is of a degree or substantive level as to provide a reason to deny project approval. I am always concerned about protecting our critical areas, and I do note that this is a site that is heavily laden with them, much more so than the typical building site. But yet I do find that both staff and the applicant have done a good job of recognizing the uniqueness of the site and preserving that uniqueness to the extent possible, and also again that preserving the hydrology of the on-site and off-site wetlands. In short, I find this application has been well prepared. City has done a good job of responding to it, and I find that it should be approved subject to that one minor adjustment to the conditions. Are there any last questions from either the city or the applicant as to what I have just said?
No.
I'm not receiving any. Again, being my first opportunity to assist the city of Issaquah on these matters, I want to thank you for your excellent presentations and the materials presented in advance of the hearing. I'll attempt to reciprocate by providing as articulate an answer or a decision as I can. A reminder that while I have orally rendered my decision, I now must reduce that to written findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the decision itself. And the key piece of all that are the findings of fact, and those will take some time. This is a highly technical application with a great many sort of side issues that need to be addressed in the findings. And so it will take me a little bit longer than it normally would to prepare those. Nonetheless, I do realize that I'm under a statutory time limit for having these out, and I'll certainly abide by that. I'll have them back to the city certainly no later than the allowed 10 business days, and hopefully much sooner than that. With that, I want to thank everyone for your assistance, and we are adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.